Right, Campden BRI, cooking instructions. Where did it all start? 35 years ago, I joined the company and was immediately working on microwave rating systems. There was quite a big issue with food poisoning from listeria with microwave heated products, and Campden were called in to do some research work and try and work out what had gone on. So we did a couple of years of research programs, developed a new rating method for microwave ovens, and as a spin-off to that, we ended up offering a service to develop products, packaging and cooking instructions for microwave ovens. So moving on about 5 years, so 30 years ago, we then started to expand on that to look at cooking instructions for ovens, grills, hobs, toasters, steaming devices, and that's how the service all kicked off. So what do we offer? It's really a scientific method of looking at cooking instruction development and ensuring that any instructions that will go back on pack will be food safe. And that's the priority. It's very easy just to develop an instruction for a product that gives you optimum quality, nice browning, nice textures, nice flavors, but without considering the safety or without really considering the implications of what you're doing on the safety of the products. It's very simple just to come up with an instruction and say the consumers will follow that. It gives us great products, but you need to be absolutely assured that the safety is there. 70 for 2 minutes or equivalent process is the safety kind of margin, which is usually targeted for non-ready-to-eat foods. So anything that you buy, which you can't eat immediately, so that anything from frozen lasagnas to raw burgers, raw chicken, really needs to hit that 70 for 2 minute process in the slowest heating location. And the work that's done to develop the instructions for that needs to take into account loads of variables. Variables might be such as the product itself, thickness, weight, start temperatures. How does that impact on the cooking instruction and the minimum temperatures achieved? The appliance itself, that's a huge one, really needs to be looked at. So if we're going to develop instructions in an oven, how might gas, electrical fan ovens vary? How might consumers' gas, electrical fan ovens vary? How can we ensure that the instructions that we develop will work in the vast majority of ovens? That's both from a food safety point of view, 70 for 2 minutes as a minimum process, and also from a quality point of view. So the service we offer is a very rounded scientific process. It's not just about getting the best quality, it's about ensuring the safety, and that's the drive. If a company produces a product that doesn't give the optimum quality, that's not so bad. There might be an issue, we might need to review that. If a company produces a product that causes food poisoning because it's unsafe from a thermal process perspective, that's a whole different kettle of fish. It's a product recall, hits the news, and that's bad publicity. So safety really is the main drive. Obviously, quality needs to be there too. So what aspects will we look at when we're kind of developing instructions? Firstly, it's the product itself. Is it going to be suitable for the kind of instructions that are required? You might not want to put something which is supposed to have a nice crispy pastry in it into a microwave oven, although it is possible. So what appliances are we going to use? Usual ones could be oven, toasters, grills, hobs, that's frying, boiling, steaming, air fryers, that's a new one. We'll talk about that in more detail in a minute. And microwave ovens. So first thing to consider really is the appliance itself and making sure that the appliance itself is going to work in a representative fashion of consumers. What are we going to use to look at that? And it's basically calibrating that appliance to work at the correct temperatures or correct settings. So for an oven, we might give an instruction for a lasagna for, let's say, 30 minutes at 200 degrees C. So how can we know that the oven's operating at 200 degrees C? A lot of companies will actually just get their ovens calibrated once a year. Maybe they'll get an external body come in and say, yep, when you turn your dial to 200, that's about right. 200 plus or minus 5 degrees, that should be okay. But if you change that dial at any particular day, or if you're going to go use 180 degrees, for example, then you are actually taking away that calibration. It's no longer exactly in the same position it was in before, and that can give you a completely different temperature setting. 10, 15, 20 degrees out is quite possible. So where you had it calibrated at 200 degrees, as soon as you change it to 150 or 180 and then turn it back to 200, there's a risk that the product isn't going to be cooked at that correct temperature, which then means any instructions you're doing won't be valid. So Campden really are quite strong on the calibration on day of use, so that we know that any appliances we're going to be using will be operating at the correct temperature. So for ovens, or in fact any device that uses hot air, so that's apart from microwave, so that's ovens, air fryers, hobs, grills, etc., then we would require that appliance to be calibrated on day of use. And how might we do that? For ovens, we would use gas, electric and fan ovens. It's important to use all three different types because they will heat differently. The airflow rates are different, the humidity in the oven's different, and the heat transfer is different. So we must use all three methods when you're developing instructions. To calibrate those, we simply put probes in the center of the oven, preheat the oven to the correct temperature until it's stable, usually 20 to 30 minutes, and then monitor the temperature over a minimum of 20-minute period. And we log that temperature, so we're monitoring, recording the temperatures every few seconds. So we'll end up with a graph, a wavy graph of as the thermostat cuts in, the temperature goes up, and as it cuts out, the temperature goes down. What we can then average that, and that will give you your oven temperature, and it should be within 2 or 3 degrees. I've seen companies try and do calibration by simply putting probes in the oven and then an outside temperature reading so they can turn the oven on and they say, well, when it gets to 200 degrees, it's fine to use. That's not so, because the oven can go, maybe if you set it to 200 degrees, up to 220, down to 180. So if you were just simply selecting a temperature at a point of 200 degrees, it might be at the peak of its thermostat or at the trough of its thermostat. So it could be 20, 40 degrees out. So it's important to log those temperatures and then work out the average, and that's then your calibration level for that particular oven. As I said, if that's ever changed, so even on the same day you reduce it to 180 and back to 220, then that 180 calibration needs to be done and the 220 again. I just think it's very unwise to assume that a calibration once a year on hot air devices will actually be the same throughout the whole year. It rarely is. One of the issues can also be is if you get drift, so if the thermostat decides to pack in or not work properly, then you can get a big temperature range, so that on day one when you calibrate the ovens, they're fine, but maybe 6 months in, it's drifted, and then you're assuming that it's still operating at the right temperature, and it's not. Which then means that any products cooked in consumers' homes using instructions developed by ovens with inaccurate temperatures may not give a safe temperature or may even overheat the product. There's also calibration techniques for hobs. So we may use a pan of water, for example, and look at the temperature rise of a couple of litres of water. Or you can use it for grills, where you could use a model food product and look at the temperature rise of that and then compare that to the setting that you're wanting to use. The only device where you get away with out calibrating every day or on day of use are microwave ovens, and that's because it's digitally controlled. So basically, when you've got your microtron on, it's either on or it's off. It's hardly ever likely to drift, and you don't have a dial temperature setting which you can adjust and put back. There are different power levels in a microwave oven, but each of those is set digitally and it won't vary. So microwaves are okay to be calibrated once a year, unless you foresee an issue, i.e. the oven's not working properly, then you should get it retested. So that covers the appliances. For the product itself, the kind of weight's going to have an impact. So if you've got a heavier weight product or sample, then that might take a little bit longer. It's always better to use worst case products when you're developing instructions from the safety point of view, and then perhaps test with the lower weight products to just make sure that they don't overheat. From a worst case scenario, it isn't just about weight, it's actually more about thickness. So if you've got a 500 gram product that's 20 centimetres long and 2 centimetres thick, and then a 500 gram product which is 10 centimetres long and 4 centimetres thick, obviously the thicker one's going to take much longer to heat. So it's not just weight, it's thickness that needs to be taken into account as well. So worst case for these kind of products is the thickest and the heaviest. Also, the start temperatures are important. So if you're cooking from chilled, you need the product really close to 0, 1, maybe 2 degrees. That's to ensure that if you've got consumers with correctly operating fridges at home that or running close to zero, that their products will get to temperature. And the same for frozen products. -18 is often quoted as a start temperature or temperature for freezers. Very often the operating temperatures as the freezer starts to work can actually drop down to -20, -22. So maybe it's better to start instruction development work at temperatures that low. So we've calibrated our devices. Let's take the oven. We've calibrated or checked that the product we've got is the right spec. It's the worst case product, so we will use those. We will then probe the products up. We will put very fine calibrated tight K thermocouples into them. They're very fine, less than 0.5 millimeter thick. And the idea behind that is they won't transfer any heat through the product. Those go into the products in the slowest heating locations. It's very important to recognise that the minimum temperature requirement of your product, that's 70 degrees for 2 minutes, is actually achieved in the slowest heating point, not an average. So you need to find where the cold point is going to be in the product, and that can be quite hard to do, especially for microwave ovens. In theory, it's the centre of the product, but it may not be. With microwave ovens, you could find temperatures lower on the surface or in the corners or at the base. It's very dependent on the fill patterns inside the oven. But for an oven, we would go for centre temperatures. So the probes go into the centre of the product. We then use a data logging system where we record the temperatures every few seconds during the cook. So we've calibrated our oven. Product is probed up. We know the start temperature is correct. The product will then go into the oven. We'll do pre-weights to make sure the product's is kind of correct weight range, or at the higher end of that. We will then cook until a 70-degree temperature is achieved. There is an alternative method of doing this, is whereby you don't probe the product at all. You just pop it in the oven and take it out and hope that it's got to 70 degrees. But that really isn't very helpful. Although it's a cheaper way of doing it, if you're not bothering to use data loggers and monitoring the temperatures, you're going to end up with just a yes or no product. Has it got to 70 degrees? Has it not? The other disadvantage with that method is that you can't actually work out the thermal process. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So we probe the product, wait till it gets to approximately 70 degrees, and that might be within a customer's requested time. So a customer might say, we'd like this product to get to temperature in 40 degrees, that gives 40 minutes. That gives us the best quality. But we might find that after 40 minutes, it's 65 degrees, which isn't enough. So we could very easily continue to a few minutes longer to get to the temperature of 70 degrees, which is needed. Conversely, we might find it gets to temperature way before the end of that time. So we could offer the client then to say that you can reduce the cook time if that helps the quality of the product. So that's the basis of it. The product then is cooked until it's 70 degrees. It comes out of the oven. We will take digital images of the product to make sure that the quality is okay, and those will go into the final report. We can then analyse the temperature and time graphs, so where we've monitored the temperatures in the centre of the product. We can then do a thermal process calculation, and that's what I was referring to earlier, is the actual requirement is 70 degrees for 2 minutes or equivalent process. So it doesn't mean it's got to hit 70 degrees and only hold it for 2 minutes. During the whole of the cooking process, as the temperature of the product increases, the effective kill of bacteria increases. So even at 50 or 60 degrees, you're getting some bacteria killed. When you get to 70 degrees, that's kind of the target temperature. Above that, you're getting even more of the bacteria killed. So the target bacteria for most cooking instruction work is Listeria monocytogenes, and 70 for 2 minutes will give a 6-log reduction. It's just an industry standard of Listeria, should it be present in the product. So if you only achieve 60 degrees in the product, rather than hitting 70 for 2 minutes, you need nearly 45 minutes at that temperature. If you hit 80 degrees, the equivalent to 70 for 2 minutes is only 5 seconds. So if people don't want to use stand times, or they want a very well-cooked product, and targeting a higher temperature can give benefits in achieving the kill effect much quicker. If for product quality, for example, you only want to hit 60 degrees, so you might, for example, want a medium to rare cooked duck, then you can achieve 60 degrees, 65 degrees maybe, but it takes a lot longer at that temperature to kill, to give you equivalent process. So it's not a case of just hitting 60, you'd need to hold it for much longer than that. And that's where logging the temperatures during the cook time can be really useful. So we can analyse the time temperature curves from the graphs and give a lethality calculation, which could be included in the reports. In terms of the replicates, there's a drive recently to reduce the number of replicates because it's cheaper. Nobody wants to do hundreds of trials, and ideally that would be great, but it's just not feasible. So Campden for many years has advocated that 5 replicates is a good number. It often takes 1 or 2 to really find the core points in the product. Although some retailers are happy with 3 or even 2, but I would still go, I think, if you want to be absolutely assured from a safety and quality point of view, that 5 replicates is the best way to go. One of the advantages, I think, with the methodology that Campden tend to use is because we're logging temperatures during the cook time, there's no fail of the product. If a product comes in and it's supplied with a cooking instruction, we can follow that. Sure, we can tell them that it's got to temperature or it hasn't, but it's no real effort for us to continue the cooking by a minute or 2 to achieve that 72-minute process. So if a company's got 45-minute cook time on a cannelloni that's frozen and it doesn't get to 70 degrees, it gets to 68 degrees, for example, we don't just reply and say, no, it's failed, start again. Very simple, just to continue the heating by another minute or 2 until we see the temperature of 70 degrees for 2 minutes is achieved, and then we can feed that back to the client. If they don't wish to use the new times, that's fine. If they want to stick to the old times, we can still give them the information about the temperatures achieved within their current cooking instruction. So it's a much kind of easier method, I think, of modifying cooking instructions rather than going backwards and forwards with failed products. I think the other advantage with the Campden kind of protocol that we will work with is that we have a single charge. We don't start, so a quote for the work is a full piece of work, and that will include weights before and after, individual weights of components if that's required. It will include digital photos before and after if that's wished for, a full report including the calibration graph, which will be done on day of use. It will include detail in terms of the observations from the product from a quality point of view, any recommendations that Campden would make towards the product to improve the quality. So even if we follow the instructions and it gets to 72 minutes and we think, well, maybe you could perhaps use a higher of a temperature in a slightly shorter time to give a better browning or vice versa, then that advice will also go into the report as well. Cooking instructions is something that you deal with. Perhaps you might like to contact us. With 35 years experience, very, very open just to chat. So if you've got issues with your products, if you've got issues with the quality of your products, if you're concerned about the protocols you're using with cooking instructions, if you'd like us to help write your protocols, so we've done that for several of the retailers, help them out with setting up their instruction protocol which everyone can follow. If you just want cooking instructions done, if you want them just to be checked, we can do that. If you want us to redevelop them, we can do that. So please just give me a call. Greg Hooper, Campden BRI.